This podcast is intended for adults only. We do not condone the use of any illegal substances, and anything we consume is for educational purposes only.
Because, we should be afraid of a plant that grows from the ground. And, endocannabinoid system is, it's in your body and it produces cannabinoids. I mean, you know what? I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna rant. Just play the music, Mitch.
What a time it is to be alive. See, I'm charged up, feeling energized, build an enterprise, move supersize. Y'all let you like a side of fries. Whoa, false guys who you idolize. Yeah, go against us, I would not advise. We the highest in the room, just look up once and you can find us. Our song should have more plays, but we too dope, they rewind us. All my targets lined up, every day my girl get fined up. All my clothes.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Canna podcast, where we are cultivating conversations concerning cannabis, culture, and creativity. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Mitch Narito.
And it's Eric Esteban here. And I'm going to just kind of give it over to you because you were talking about before our podcast, for our pre-talk podcast, you were talking about how you heard this. What was the name of the podcast again?
It's called Science Versus.
Science Versus. And it was breaking down all the scientific facts about cannabis, and you said that you were going to blow my mind.
We'll see.
I'm looking to have my mind blown. But by the way, my mind's already halfway blown because we already smoked.
We did.
We smoked some wedding cake, which is nice. It's nice. The airy bud though, it's not gonna. The 28 grams from that one plant is not going to last very long.
It's okay though. It's a nice mellow high. It's very nice.
Nice, good high. But before we start the scientific update, let's do a little quick grow update because I don't know if we did a grow update the last time. Did we do a grow?
We did, but we should keep everyone
keep
up to date.
everyone abreast of the Gelato 33 Larry Bird. You're not going to react to the Larry Bird anymore. It doesn't hurt you anymore.
Whatever. I'm numb. I'm numb to it.
No, but the second round of clones and the clones where I feel like I've hit the marks on every you just took a look at the grow. What do you think? What's your visual opinion of how the grow looks since you last saw it?
It's looking strong. It definitely is not as much as what you've had in the past, like in terms of density. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of interested to see what the end product looks like because I know like when you trim and then you cure everything gets smaller. Mm-hmm. And like the tops of your plants, they look heavier, they look bigger. Mm-hmm. And then as you go down, it gets smaller and smaller.
Right.
So I just want to see what the final yield is going to be.
Yeah, I'm very, because the first one clone that I grew from clone that I got from Buds and Roses yielded 78 grams. And then 5 clones of that same plant that were monster clones only yielded like 55 grams, mm-hmm. which was a trip. And also because I messed up on the fertilizing and the whole cycle. And I made a lot of mistakes during that cycle. But this one, I feel like I've hit it, and I feel like they've expanded as when they're supposed to expand. So I feel like I'm growing them to the best of whatever genetics I have right now. So I feel like this yield will be comparable to the first plant.
Okay, all right.
I hope.
How many more weeks we got before?
About a week and a half.
Oh, already?
Yeah, by the beginning of June. So it'll be I'll have a perpetual harvest every month of the year for 2024 until June, and then I reset set the tents and pick out some new genetics, which will be the whole thing that will be continue. That'll be the continuing saga of the grow, which I'll be breaking down the different genetic companies and seed companies, and I'm not sure. We'll see what we do.
That's wild because this is episode 18 now.
Yeah, this is episode 18.
Time just flies. Like you've gone through how many harvests? You've
and smoked every last nug.
Yeah, you've smoked or given away a lot of weed.
Yeah, no, I have given away a lot of weed. Which at this point in time now, where I'm looking on my last harvest, I'm a little
regretful.
Regretful of being so generous, but at the same time, it's cool. And I know. It was my first year and a half, 2 years of growing. Now I've learned. I'm also learning how to maximize the tents. I'm trying to figure out the layout of the tents, the pots, how many plants I got, how many seeds I need to get, how many different strains I want to grow. These are the things I'm thinking about now, so that the next harvest we'll have enough that'll last us a couple months. And then but at the same time, I still want to keep that perpetual harvest, I'll still grow autoflowers. I'll still keep trying to grow stuff so that every potential harvest and good month to dry here in California, because July, August, no good to dry. It's
too hot.
Too hot. They'll dry up in a day, and it'll be like powder. It'll be terrible. So the best thing to do during those months is to veg, so that you go grow these big, healthy plants that grew up in a tropical climate.
For the soil, does it lose its nutrients? Like, do you have to give it a break or just add more to it?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do now. Is I'm going to add more of the organic. Gaia Green is the fertilizer company that I use as far as for my organic material that I add to the soil. And then I'll also, when I plant, I'm going to add a bunch of worm castings, which is worm shit.
Yeah, bug parts.
But also, it's also, a lot of people say, and I can attest to this, when you put worm castings, you're gonna get worm eggs in the worm casting. You're not gonna help it, and some of those worm eggs will end up becoming worms, and now you're gonna have a living soil in your pots.
But isn't that what you've wanted?
That's what you want. That's exactly what you want, and that's why I say that's part of why. It's funny, like the one time I went to Lowe's to buy worm castings instead of just having it shipped or, having, whatever, going to Home Depot. I went to Lowe's nearby, and there was this older gentleman also buying worm castings. And of course,
you picked each other out?
No, he came up to me and he's like, what strains you growing? And it was a trip because, and I don't, that was at a time where, and it's still at a time where you can get the hops latent virus, and there's a lot of different viruses, so you always want to be careful with taking clones from other people, because you don't know how their grow setup is or how clean their grow setup is, or if they have the virus. So you're better off buying from a trusted dealer or vendor, or growing from seed. And even in that case, sometimes you'll worry about seeds that are infected with stuff.
If you guys haven't seen what Eric looks like yet, if you haven't bothered to look him up or see a picture of him, he does look like that guy. You could pick out in your crowd and be like, yeah, you look like you smoke weed.
Oh, for sure. I have cultivated this look since I was 19 years old and took my first puffs. I know I want to be known as the guy who knows smokes. I've never tried to hide it. There were times in Chicago where it was still very dangerous to smoke weed in public, and I would still walk down the street and smoke a joint because I'm just stupid like that.
People don't assume I smoke weed, but when they find out I do, they're not surprised.
No, I assumed from jump that you smoke weed.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I did from jump. I mean, yeah, I knew from jump because I can, I know.
All right.
I got that sixth sense about potheads.
I guess so. So let's get into this episode. So
yeah, I want to hear what you have to tell me, because I know you'd mentioned something about there's some type of a distinction between indica and sativa that you were talking about.
Okay, hold on. Let me roll it back. So
okay, roll it back. Go ahead, because I'm rushing to hear these things that are going to blow my mind.
As I've mentioned before, I was listening to the Science Versus podcast. It's hosted by Wendy Zuckerman, and
Science Versus. Now this is not a cannabis podcast. This is more of a science podcast.
Yeah, it's a science podcast. Okay. It's usually like science versus and then whatever topic they have at hand. So
okay. So science versus got it.
So like previous episodes I've listened to recently, it's like science versus cannabis, science versus MDMA, science versus heartache.
Nice.
Stuff like that. So
cool.
They go into these actual segments where they've interviewed scientists from all over the world trying to find like hard facts about certain subjects, and then they report their findings. Right
on. Okay.
And this episode was from April.
Okay, so recently.
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
Well, they probably did their 420 episode for April.
Yeah, well, this pretty much. This came out April 4th.
Okay.
But they talk about how there's different types of weed, right? And one of the experiments that was conducted, and forgive me for not knowing exactly who did it, but I know it was.
Well, you can go to this Science versus Cannabis, and you can listen to the podcast.
Yeah, listen to the podcast. I'm just paraphrasing.
But we're digesting it. So if you want to, you can listen to that podcast and then come back and hear how we thought of it. So you got 2 hours of listening. It's wonderful.
So one of the things they were trying to figure out was what was the exact difference between indicas and sativas, if there is a difference,
right?
And what they discovered is that there isn't.
Right. Well, I knew that.
It doesn't matter if it's indica, sativa. Indica, sativa is more of a marketing thing that
correct.
The industry has pushed upon people because it just makes it easier to sell when you can tell people it does a certain thing versus another certain thing.
Mitch, I knew that, and not to say that you didn't blow my mind, but please say that again for our listeners, because that is something that people got to get into their heads, that y'all are all smoking hybrids. Everything that you smoke is a hybrid.
It's not even hybrid. It's just all weed.
Correct. It's all cannabis. It's all, again, like you said, sativa and indica are merely selling points.
Yeah, there's no specific genetic marker that they discovered. And they've tested different types of the same strain, right? So let's say they had like a Bubba Kush or whatever. They took samples from all over the world. This experiment was it took place in America, Canada, Europe, and I believe Australia. So they took different samples of like the different strains from these different areas and tried to see if there was anything like genetically similar. And the results were inconclusive. They couldn't make any.
And that would go more towards proving the theories about terroir and how there's different flavors and different microorganisms that flavor and enhance the cannabis in the soil of that particular region. So the region in Australia or in Europe or America or wherever, it's going to be all different environments, different climates. So that's going to affect the content and flavor and chemical content of the weed.
And see, and like all of that, okay, according to this podcast, all of what you said cannot be proven or has not been proven.
And that's the other thing. It hasn't been proven because that's part of why we wanted to talk about the science stuff is because that's the essential part of this rescheduling, where we're rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1, where it's a dangerous, addictive drug, to a now Schedule 3 drug where it can be studied and for its medical capabilities and medical, properties and all the other things.
The U.S. is behind.
We're very behind because I'm guessing that in the scientific research that you were listening to on this podcast, most of the results were coming from other countries.
Yeah, it was mostly Europe. And another thing is so when you go to the store and someone's like, oh, this is an indica, it'll have you in the couch or whatever, and this is sativa, this is a more active weed. That's BS. Like there's no way to tell that. Weed is weed. If you find a particular strain that gets you high and you like the effects, keep smoking that strain.
And also when we've talked about this before, the endocannabinoid system. Everyone's endocannabinoid system is chemically and biologically a little bit different, just like everybody's DNA is a little bit different. So the cannabinoids in some weed are going to affect you some way, and the cannabinoids in other weed are going to affect them in another way.
Okay, you need to listen to this podcast because they spoke about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that, yes, there are cannabinoids within that react to certain things in our endocannabinoid system, but you cannot tailor a specific response.
Right. You can't. That's we're saying the same thing.
So pretty much what happens is the receptors, anytime you smoke weed and it's not occurring in your body naturally. So what it does is it just floods your system with cannabinoids. So it's just a blanketing, and that's what it does. So it'll hit everything all at once, but then there's no way to tell if it's going to do a certain thing or if you'll receive a certain reaction.
Right. Depending on the strain, because depending on the chemical makeup of the strain, it can affect you in a different way according to your chemical makeup. It's a weird thing.
It's also a very individual thing.
But exactly. It's a very singular thing with each individual person, where one weed can affect me one way and it can affect you a totally different way.
Yeah.
And also we've even shown that on our podcast where we smoked the 3 different strains of the 3 different plants of the same strain when we smoked the mint jelly from Humboldt Seed Company, and we got 3 different tastes, and then one was particularly strong and the other 2 were, it even within the strain, it was a different effect for even the 3 of us that were sampling it.
Yeah, and the way that the effects hit a person, it's based off of those people's dispositions, like how their body will react to it.
That's why if somebody says to me, I used to smoke weed and I don't anymore because it makes me too paranoid, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I don't force them because that's their thing. That's how it works with them, and I'm not going to try and push my stuff on them. In the same way we were talking about before with, I'm open about the fact that this is a medicine to me and I consume it all the time, but at the same time, I'm not going to put it in your face or force you to do it. And I feel like, being able to have these distinction as the consumer and knowing that there's not really a distinction between sativa and indica, it almost opens the market up for you as a consumer, because it's like, you know what, I don't need, people have told me that I smoke all indicas.
It's just labels.
But it's just labels. It's just labels. It's more about finding the strain that hits you the way that you want it to hit.
But see, and that's one of the things. It kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, and for me, it doesn't matter. That's
I've smoked enough to know it's like I know that there are certain textures or consistencies or whatever. Like there's a certain way I like my weed.
For sure.
Right? And the way that I choose to pick out my weeds is different than anybody else's. But ultimately it's all the same. Like it's just gonna get you high.
It's whatever appeals to you, really. Almost.
And it's THC content. And the thing that's difficult about measuring THC content is that it's very inconsistent about how people are testing it.
And it's also not only that, THC is only one of the things that get you high.
Yeah, it's
because
a combination.
There's an entourage effect is what it's called. It's referred to as the entourage effect, which is all the terpenes, all the different scents. And obviously there's a lot of different scents throughout all the different strains. Sometimes strains can smell like chocolate. Some strains can smell like oranges, all the different scents. So those terpenes are also different indicators on how it's going to hit you, because those scents are also an effect of that entourage.
And then moving on to back to the podcast, they talked about CBD, and does CBD actually mellow you out? Does it help with anxiety? And conclusively, no, it does not. Like the amounts of CBD that you would have to take, it's really negligible. It's hard to measure.
See, and I've heard from what the science that I've heard and read on CBD is it's more effective as an anti-inflammatory and for muscles and a muscle relaxant.
Okay.
Than it is for necessarily mental and mental anxieties and different things like that. So, but that's from a collective, from all the things I've heard about CBD.
What's mentioned in the podcast is that pretty much what's more important, like if you're trying to reduce anxiety, or if because some people, like you said, they smoke and sometimes they get paranoid, right?
Yeah.
So one of the ways to adjust to that, it's not necessarily getting a lower THC content or whatever. It's just the amount that you're taking in. It's dosage. So if you smoke or you eat it and you get paranoid or you get those feelings, then maybe it's you just had too much, or you're not the type of person that can handle certain amounts, like past a certain level.
Right. Maybe your endocannabinoid system needs no blankets, whereas mine needs multiple blankets.
You're dumb. They talk about anxiety and depression.
I'm like that princess with the mattresses with my blankets.
The pea?
The princess and the pea.
Princess and the
and
pea.
I only get high when I can feel the pea at the bottom of the mattress.
He's talking about a vegetable, everybody. It's not actual...
Listen, man, they know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. You've been talking about Kendrick and Drake so much, we don't know anymore.
I don't. You're right. I'm obsessed. We don't bring it up. We'll start talking about that instead of what we're talking about.
Anyway, so they were talking about anxiety and depression. Weed can help with that, but it also is dependent on the person, because a lot of people, if you're already in a bad state of mind, or if you're not in the best state,
it enhances those receptors in your brain. So in a lot of ways, sometimes like the way that when you're listening to a great song when you're high and it makes you feel great, in the same way when you're sad and you smoke some weed, it might enhance your sadness, and that's not a good thing necessarily, depending on your state of depression.
It brings about what's already in there,
Yeah, that's
it
what
just
it
brings
is.
it to the surface.
It's like money in that way.
All right.
Because they say, how they say when you get a lot of money, it doesn't change who you are. It just shows who you are.
Yeah, it just brings out your character.
Yeah, and it's just it's very similar in that way to weed, where whatever's there is what's gonna come up. It's not gonna sometimes.
I think that's why, like, around me, people are like, "Oh, you're just very chill. You're very zen." Like, I'm very even keeled, or I try to be.
Can you imagine how high strung I would be if I didn't smoke weed all day? Can you imagine?
I've known Eric for a few years now, and that would be intense. It would be very intense.
Because this is me, and as intense as I am, and as passionate as I am, and as loud as I am, and as talkative as I am, this is on, like...
This is the subdued you?
This is the chilled out, stoned me. It's a trip, right?
I've thought about that, because remember I've told you I've quit weed at certain points in my life, and I've tried to see what kind of effect it would have on me. Like, I was like, okay, would it give me more clarity? It does give me a little more clarity. Would it affect the way I do my work? No, it doesn't.
No.
They talk about this in the podcast. Would it make me less creative?
No, I'm sure not.
And that's one of the interesting things in the podcast. They mentioned, does weed boost creativity? It does not.
No.
What it does is it makes you think you do. It
puts you in the mindset to be creative.
No, it's not even that. It just makes you think that you're more creative.
Well, yeah, but like I said, it's semantics. It's the same, kind of that same type of thing. If you think you're creative because of weed, then guess what? It will enhance that feeling and make you creative.
No, but like with actual data, the experiment they did, right, is they were asking people, like, for example, okay, here's a brick. Tell me all the uses you can think of in X amount of time, right? Like, how would you use the brick, right? And what they discovered is that the people that were high on weed, they were coming up with the same ideas, but when they were mentioned, they were more like enthusiastic about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." That's all it is. It's just
it's okay, because my comedy mantra in life is yes and. Positive enforcement, positive acceptance of whatever's in front of you, and then your perception and imagination contribution, right? Yes and that's all weed is for me. It's like my yes and. It's my I can chill out and be able to. Yes.
No, I think you and I are similar in that respect. Like, weed doesn't make me pump the brakes like it does for a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people, that's when they get paranoid. They're like, "Oh, what's happening? I think I need to chill out. I need to calm down."
Right. No, I love to ride the wave.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just always on the water.
That's why he's all pruny, folks. I'm gonna bring a damper.
What's a damper?
We're gonna talk about
long-term effects.
Long-term effects.
No, I see the notes, and I always avoid the videos that say the long-term effects of cannabis, only because it's avoidance more than anything.
It's not as bad as you think.
Okay, good.
They say that memory definitely is affected by it. Short-term memory, long-term memory.
I still remember kindergarten. I'm cool.
Yeah, it's not like a huge thing.
Yeah.
But it does have an effect on cognitive ability at some point. It also
Does it cause plantar fasciitis? Because goddamn, my feet hurt.
No, that's just you.
That's my old ass.
That's just your age. No, but in terms of physical stuff, combustion, any type of combustion, is just not good for you because you're smoking.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's inhaling dried materials into your lungs.
Yeah.
Period.
So joints, bongs, whatever. They're not great. They do mention like the best way to consume it would be like a dry herb vaporizer. But, you know, from my experience, it is a different type of high, and it's also such a bitch to clean a freaking dry herb vaporizer.
Yeah, I'm cool. Because I've also heard that scientifically, part of the reason why cannabis is not as bad as cigarettes is that tobacco burns at a higher temperature than cannabis does. So cannabis burns at a lower temperature, so that lower temperature tends to, which would kind of lend itself to that hypothesis of, you know, the green the dry herb vaporizer would be almost that same thing as long as the temperature is not as high. It would be that you're just inhaling the fumes of the herb rather than the burning.
Yeah, it's combustion.
Smoke and fire.
Yeah, combustion. Any fire is not good for your lungs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
But that being said, in terms of long-term effects, like it's debatable on whether or not like it's serious. Because one of the things that I found fascinating was the amount of weed that you smoke can trigger psychosis. Like that's one thing. Like people will have. And it's a very low percentage of actual users.
Explain what psychosis is, just for anybody who doesn't know what that means.
It's just you have a mental break.
Oh.
Yeah, it can make you...
a Mitch McConnell kind of like pause kind of break, or like that, where you... or
it could be that, but it's more like... you know, like it could lead to
I
like,
did bust on Mitch McConnell, guys. I don't give a fuck. That old dude can die.
He
okay,
can suck a dick.
He can suck a dick and die.
But anyway, no. But they talk about like it could lead to schizophrenia, like later on in life, like mentally, it might like.
Is it more like people who are prone to those things, or is it necessarily it can start it?
I can't remember exactly. I don't think it was like
I'm
like
sure,
a specific
to be honest,
cause.
I part of me thinks that as much as I agree with a lot of what these studies are, these are still we're still just scratching the surface on this plant. You know, there's still, I think there's so many other scientific discoveries that we don't know about this plant, and we're still just scratching the surface. So I feel like, but that's part of me why I'm trying to keep positive about the rescheduling versus the descheduling, because, you know, obviously if we're up to me, I'd rather have it be descheduled than fully legalized. But at the same time, this is a big country, and, you know,
no, there's going to be money involved, so people are going to have to regulate it some way.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's the unfortunate thing when you live in a capitalistic society. I wish that we could all just, you know, give away free shit and do barters and
just go back to like a middle age system, like
no, or even a universal income system.
UBI. I'd be a fan of UBI.
I would be, because I think part of that would include some form of like government subsidized thing where you grow your own food, because I think that's part of, we're wasting a lot of land. You know, like this is really, growing my own cannabis is really, I mean, you see, you're here at the house, you see, I got a peach tree in the front, I got peppers and strawberry patch and tomatoes and so. I'm at a point. Can I grow my own food? Or am I only eating the food that I grow? No, of course not. But at the same time, everybody doing their part and revitalizing the soil by growing food and doing stuff, that could be a movement. And, you know, part of it could be growing cannabis. You know,
I agree. Like, there's a lot of stuff that, in terms of growing your own stuff or just providing for yourself, not being able to have to go to the market and pick stuff up, if you could just do it at home, like
it's better for our environment, it's better for your soul, for you, because it reconnects you to the earth. You know, there's so many benefits to growing your own food and of course growing your own cannabis for me, and again, it also saves you a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
So part of me is all of the movement, everything, the rescheduling, even these scientific discoveries that are coming and are going to and keep coming, it just keeps pushing me towards the idea of, I'm going to keep growing my own and keep figuring out and maximizing my yield every time I can, every grow. But now that I'm thinking about it, going back to our grow and the Canna grow studio and our final harvest, this final harvest, if all said and done, will have to last us 4 months.
Have to last you 4 months.
I should just keep all this shit for myself. I'm not going to be generous at all.
Ration it out until you can start growing again.
And I think I'm just gonna start growing again in June. I'm just gonna, because then it's, I'll also probably plant some autoflowers, so I know I'll get a harvest in 3 months, and then another harvest in that other month. So it'll start the perpetual up again. But that's kind of where I have to be, because
but you've saved thousands of dollars already, literally thousands of dollars in weed.
Yeah, I really have. It's really great. It's been, because you know how much I used to spend. And I spend nothing now at the dispensary. And that's where you guys want to be. And that's where we want to get you guys to. So keep listening to the Canna podcast. I mean, we're at 30 minutes now. So what else would you want to share with us from that scientific podcast that you heard that would be like a, one of those things that, because I'll say this, I've been doing my own research and listen to a bunch of different scientists. Like I listened to the Bioactive podcast with Riley and Mayabi Shields, and they talk about a lot of this stuff where, I keep want to almost repeat the first thing that you said, which is there is no distinction between sativa and indica. And that part of the marketing ploys of the dispensary are the things that I really want to blow up,
Yeah, it's all marketing tactics. They're just trying to, they know that if they label something as a certain type, even if it's not that, brand recognition or name recognition on its own will sell the product.
And we haven't even started talking about sprayed on terps and old weed and all the different things that these multi-state corporations now are
it's getting more processed.
It's worried, and it again, I keep going back to the whole thing about when I was thinking about back when this was illegal, and I knew that one day it would be legal, but I also knew that one day, and part of me is, it kind of makes me want to ask the question, if tobacco had not been, monetized and corporatized the way that it has, would they really be as bad for you, cigarettes? Or would tobacco be, who knows what a pure tobacco cigarette would taste like? Because that's not something that I think most people can actually experience.
Yeah, but it still has nicotine, no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so nicotine was the bad chemical, right?
Well,
one of,
but it's not like what is it? It's like it's literally hundreds or maybe even thousands of chemicals that go into the processing of one cigarette.
Right. And that to me is more of the cancer causing aspects of cigarettes.
Yeah, if you were just to get like plain tobacco and then roll a cigarette or whatever yourself,
like a Cuban cigar where it was Cuban tobacco rolled by hand rolled, that type of thing. I don't know that those, and I'm not a scientist, I wouldn't know. I don't know but at the same time, the only reason I'm even bringing that up is because that's what you get when you grow your own weed.
Yeah.
You know that there's nothing sprayed on there. You know that there's no artificial terpenes sprayed on to make it so it sells better, or it's enhanced with certain chemicals so that it stays moist, or whatever that other things that they haven't. Because you got to remember, guys, all the stuff in the dispensary that's currently in the dispensary is only regulated to your state regulations, and however you feel about those state regulations is how you should feel about that weed.
No, yeah. Like, I know that a lot of stuff that doesn't pass quality control in California just gets sent out to other states.
Oh, for sure.
Because they know people will buy it, even if they just say, oh, it's from California.
Because the quality control here is higher, which is bankrupting a lot of the smaller farmers, But at the same time, the quality control here is so high that all you have to do is, like you said, say it's from California and other states. And this is the gray market and the black market, guys. You got to be real, because
There's,
these
like,
multi-state,
resellers,
these multi-state corporations. I'll remember when I was in New York, and there was a store that I went into, and they had stacks of bags, empty bags, and they were all with the Cookies brand on it, but it was bootleg.
Oh,
So it was just empty cookie. So you could go into a weed shop in New York, buy a pallet of cookie bags, and then go home, take your weed and put it in there, and now you're selling cookies.
oh, what? That's crazy.
But I saw it with my own eyes, because we're in a deregulated industry right now. So it's wild, wild west still. So that's another reason for me, again, like, if I'm in New York and I see that, I'm not trying to smoke weed that I buy. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's just, if you're buying organic food at the grocery store and you're worried about your health and you're worried about the different things, and you're not smoking cigarettes and all these different things, but you're smoking weed and you're buying it from the dispensary. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just
do
saying,
your research. Just buyer beware. Just know what you're getting into.
exactly. That's really what it boils down to: is buyer beware when you're buying stuff. And if you don't want to buyer beware, you should grow your own.
I think that's a good spot to end. So you've been listening to the Canna podcast, where we are cultivating conversations concerning cannabis, culture, and creativity. I'm one of your hosts, Mitch Narito.
And it's Eric Esteban. And just, guys, stay elevated.
Stay lifted. Like, subscribe.
Yep. Write that review. Peace, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got my hoodie on, now peep the chest as human catalyst. Downtown Chula Vista, on 3rd Ave where I go cop some shit. Fuck a thief, so fuck zoomies, yeah, they whack ass jacket shit. Yeah, I move too swift, so I striking silence. Fuck the violence, man, check my mileage, cause I got driving. First tour, I drove 6 states, never thought I'd be there right by my side, man. What a time it is to be alive. See, I'm charged up, feeling energized, building enterprise, move supersize. Y'all let shit like a side of fries. Whoa, false guys who you idolize, yeah, go against us, I would not advise. We the highest in the room, just look up once and you can find us. Our song should have more plays, but we too though, they rewind us. All my targets lined up, every day my girl get fined up. All my clothes is local, bitch, I really rock designer.
Gang, highest in the room, yo, we get fucked up. Hey, you can count on Trey, can't bring the loud pack. Hey, get us in the stew and that's game over. Western Metal Building, that's a home run. Yeah, get the up or leave the fuck a Folgers. Little bitch, I made the beat and dropped the full verse. I just hit a steelo, I got dripped up. Package born and raised, bitch, I got dripped up. Y no se compara. Yo estoy con mi pana, se llama Trega, fumando ganja. Estamos con Cali, fumando en Cali, yo sé que traen ganas. Ella me dice, papi, que terminamos la cama. Highest in the room, yeah, we get fucked up. Hey, you can count on Trey, can't bring the loud pack. Hey, get us in the stew and that's game over. Western Metal Building, that's a home run.
Yeah, we got hits like Tatis and Machado, man, we know you're not a leader. Cause all our moves you just follow, packing big bowls. You know we just scooped up that gelato. Cause I smoke killer, my shirt iller. Yo, ask our dealer, we the highest in the room, just look up once and you can find us. Our song should have more plays, but we too though, they rewind us. All my targets lined up, every day my girl get fined up. All my clothes is local, bitch, I rarely rock designer.